Forget the polite period dramas. The best British films are built on grit, grey skies, and uncomfortable truths. Here are 13 brilliant essential movies that captured the real texture of the UK and refused to compromise. Mike Leigh famously kept Brenda Blethyn and Marianne Jean-Baptiste apart for the entire rehearsal process of Secrets and Lies. He did it so that when they finally met in that roadside cafe, the awkwardness would not be acted. It would be real. The camera parks itself next to them for 9 uninterrupted minutes, refusing to cut away. You watch the denial physically crumble in real time, shifting from polite small talk to hyperventilating shock without a single edit to hide behind. Timothy Spall quietly anchors the chaos around them, playing a photographer who captures happy moments for strangers while his own family slowly disintegrates in silence at home. It swept the BAFTAs and won the Palme d'Or, yet it remains one of those rare films that still feels quietly overlooked outside serious film circles. That disconnect is striking. Secrets and Lies is not a relic of the 90s. It is a film that keeps revealing new layers every time you return to it, and that's exactly why it deserves far more attention than it gets, today more than ever. With Ratcatcher, Lynne Ramsay refused to treat the 1973 Glasgow garbage strike as just background context. She treated the rotting trash bags like claustrophobic geography. She purposefully cast William Eadie, a complete novice found at a local school, because he had zero theatrical training. He didn't know how to project his voice to the back of a room or fake an emotion. He just muttered and breathed, existing entirely in front of the lens. Made on a modest budget of roughly £1 million, the film went on to win the Camera d'Or at Cannes, announcing Ramsay as a major new voice overnight. The camera stays stubbornly at a child's eye level, forcing you to navigate the debris alongside him. When James ties the mouse to the balloon and watches it float toward what looks like a grainy, distant Earth, the film breaks its own rules, injecting fantasy where it shouldn't belong. It didn't just capture a specific moment in Scottish history, it rewrote the visual language of the entire British film industry. This is sensory realism at its peak, finding the beauty hiding inside the gutter without ever cleaning up the mess. If Ratcatcher was about the suffocation of staying put, Morvern Callar is a jagged lesson in the violence of escape. Ramsay didn't just adapt a book here. She committed a heist on standard narrative structure. She dropped Samantha Morton into actual unsimulated raves in Spain, forcing the camera to fight its way through crowds that had no idea they were in a movie. You feel that lack of control in the opening sequence, where the rhythmic flashing of Christmas lights provides the only pulse for a dead body on the floor. It's quiet, tactile, and deeply uncomfortable. This remains one of the most criminally overlooked films of the last 20 years, because it dares to suggest that grief doesn't always look like crying. Sometimes it looks like pure, selfish hedonism. It changed how indie cinema uses sound, turning a mixtape into the protagonist, yet somehow, it's still waiting for the massive audience it deserves. Truly brilliant cinema often hides in the movies that refuse to hold your hand, and this one never lets go. Decades before This Is England wrapped the skinhead scene in retro nostalgia, Made in Britain presented it as pure poison. It captures the hate without a filter, showing it not as a misunderstood phase, but as a deliberate weapon. Tim Roth, in his furious screen debut, plays Trevor with a terrifying, articulate intelligence that demolishes the mindless thug stereotype. He isn't confused. He knows exactly what he is saying, and he enjoys the impact. You feel that intent in the camera work. Alan Clark used the newly developed Steadicam to stalk Trevor through corridors and institutions, turning the camera into a presence that never lets him out of its sight. There is no visual relief, no safe distance from his worldview. The film was made on a stripped-down television budget, which only sharpens its impact. No polish, no escape. Made in Britain remains a largely unknown film, but it feels inseparable from the era that produced it. A harsh, unfiltered snapshot of Britain before the edges were sanded down for mass consumption. Not a timeless classic. A time capsule that still burns when you open it. Michael Caine effectively destroyed his own vanity for educating Rita, delivering one of his most criminally overlooked performances by playing a man who was actively hiding from the world. He gained 30 pounds and stopped washing his hair, but the tragedy is in the drinking. He doesn't play Frank as a fun drunk. He tucks whiskey bottles behind the classics with a tired, functional desperation. You feel that heaviness in the office scenes where the camera stays static, trapping him in a dusty tomb of books, while Julie Walters attacks the silence with nervous, unpolished velocity. She forces him to wake up. While the film opens up the original play with shots of Dublin, the important work stays in that room. It captures the specific ache of the British working class in the 80s. This remains the definitive film about the emotional cost of ambition. It works because it refuses to be a simple crowd pleaser, delivering a comedy that is actually a tragedy in disguise. People often call My Beautiful Laundrette the British Brokeback Mountain, but the struggle here isn't the silence of the open range, it is the suffocating noise of the city. Channel 4 commissioned this strictly for television with a budget so small, the crew had to steal shots on London streets without permits. You feel that urgency in the lighting. The neon powders sign buzzes with a cheap electric hum that defines the entire aesthetic. Daniel Day-Lewis, in the role that alerted Hollywood to his existence, plays Johnny not as a romantic hero, but as a recovering fascist with a dangerous stillness. He leans against washing machines like he is waiting for a fight. The romance with Omar isn't handled with soft focus. It is messy, opportunistic, and happens in the back room while the business runs out front. Stephen Frears captures the specific texture of Thatcher's Britain, where everything is a transaction. This film is essential. It strips the melodrama out of the genre, treating the relationship exactly like the laundrette itself, something you have to wash and defend every single day. 24/7 captures a specific kind of British despair by refusing to use color. Shane Meadows shot in high-contrast black and white, not for an art house aesthetic, but to match the bleak monochrome reality of the housing estates. He dropped Bob Hoskins, a genuine Hollywood heavyweight, into a cast of local kids who had never seen a script before, creating a friction you can't fake. You see this in the training sequences, which lack the rhythmic edit of a Rocky film. The punches are messy, the footwork is terrible. Hoskins plays Darcy without a shred of vanity, treating these non-actors with a frantic, paternal energy, desperate to save them from the nothingness waiting outside the gym doors. This film essentially built the prototype for the Meadows style he perfected in This Is England. It stripped away the glory of the sports genre to show that the fight isn't about winning a title belt. It's just about having a reason to wake up before noon. After the global hit of Local Hero, audiences expected another feel-good movie, but Comfort and Joy offered a strange, melancholy detour instead. The script takes the very real, violent Glasgow ice cream wars of the 1980s and filters them through the dissociative fog of a midlife crisis, with Bill Forsyth's dry, offbeat touch shaping every uneasy turn. Bill Patterson plays a radio DJ who has just been dumped. Rather than processing the grief, he sleepwalks into a turf war between rival ice cream families. The genius lies in the visual contrast. The camera shoots the ice cream vans like military convoys, gliding through rain-slicked streets with a menacing, silent absurdity, while Patterson drifts through the frame with the numbness of a man who has lost his tether. You feel the isolation most in the radio booth scenes, where he speaks cheerfully into the void while his personal life dissolves. This is a comedy that feels like a nervous breakdown. It stands as one of Bill Forsyth's most overlooked achievements. This is a British gem that quietly slipped through the cracks and deserves to be rediscovered, funny in a way that hurts and completely unafraid to leave its hero stranded in the cold with an ice cream cone in his hand. Before Tyrannosaur, Olivia Colman was the funny woman from Peep Show. Paddy Considine saw something far darker underneath. He wrote the role to strip away her comedy armor completely, then paired her with Peter Mullen to build a film out of exposed nerve endings. Mullen plays Joseph with a volcanic, unpredictable rage that poisons every room he enters. The film announces its intent immediately with an act of violence so blunt it feels like a warning. There are no safety rails here. The camera stays low and close, trapping the actors inside cramped terraced houses where beige wallpaper, narrow hallways, and ticking clocks turn ordinary space into pressure chambers. Nothing is stylized, nothing is softened. Abuse isn't framed as spectacle, it's shown as routine. Tyrannosaur is a deeply challenging, unsettling, and often brutal film, but its bleakness is in service of something stubbornly human. It is not an easy watch, and it never pretends to be. Beneath the brutality is a desperate search for meaning. The film drags you through filth to reach a sliver of redemption that feels real only because of how much it costs to earn it. Timothy Spall didn't just memorize lines for Mr. Turner. He spent 2 years learning to paint so he wouldn't look like an actor holding a brush. Even the dialogue was dug out of the dirt. Mike Leigh built the story through months of rigorous improvisation, forcing the cast to live as the characters until the grunts and growls felt natural. You see that raw physicality in the varnishing day sequence, where Turner literally spits on his canvas, grinding a violent streak of red into a gray seascape while his polite rivals watch in horror. Cinematographer Dick Pope matched this intensity, shaping light and color so the digital image feels like living oil paint. Most biopics polish their subjects into inspiration. This one leans into the grime. It's based on the real J.M.W. Turner, and it strips away every comforting myth of the gentleman artist to show the labor, the obsession, and the isolation underneath. As a film, it's demanding, unsentimental, and completely uncompromising. It isn't designed to be likable. It's designed to be honest. And for viewers willing to meet it on those terms, Mr. Turner stands as one of the most serious and rewarding artistic biopics ever made. The Pet Shop Boys had no interest in a standard concert film, so with It Couldn't Happen Here, they commissioned a fever dream instead. What began as a 1-hour promo for the Actually album mutated into a feature-length surreal collage that refuses to explain itself. You spend the runtime watching Neil Tennant in a tuxedo drive a Ford Zephyr along a bleak British coastline while reality quietly unravels. There's no plot to track, only images that drift in and out like half-remembered dreams. A blind priest, ventriloquist dummies, a man literally on fire strolling down the street with a suitcase. Chris Lowe barely speaks, moving more like a piece of furniture than a bandmate. It plays like a Salvador Dali painting dropped into Clacton-on-Sea. Critics tore it apart for lacking narrative, but narrative was never the point. You don't watch this for story, you watch it for nerve. It's a hypnotic artifact, from a brief moment when pop stars had the money, the control, and the nerve to project their strangest visions straight onto cinema screens. Nil by Mouth is not a crime film or a redemption story. It is a family portrait painted in bruises. Gary Oldman wrote and directed it from his own childhood, pulling directly from the South London world he grew up in. What you're watching is not imagined violence, it's remembered. Ray Winston plays the father, not as a monster, but as a man who cannot stop himself from becoming one. He's charming one minute, terrifying the next. And that unpredictability is what makes the film so hard to sit through. Kathy Burke, in a performance that feels almost too exposed to be acting, holds the emotional weight. She plays survival as exhaustion, not strength. Nothing here is softened. The rooms are cramped. The arguments feel overheard. Even the music barely breathes. Oldman refuses to give you distance or comfort because that distance didn't exist in the life this came from. Based directly on the director's own family history, Nil by Mouth is one of the most brutally honest and overlooked British domestic dramas ever put on screen. It isn't a film people casually revisit. It's the kind of film that brands itself into you and stays there. Mixing a violent IRA kidnapping plot with a complex romance seemed like commercial suicide. That is why major studios passed on The Crying Game. To anchor the risk, the production gambled on Forrest Whitaker, fresh off a Cannes win, but hardly a box office guarantee. He plays Jody not as a generic soldier, but as a terrified man using charm as a survival mechanic. You see the mastery in the greenhouse scenes. Even with a canvas hood often covering his face, he builds a specific, intimate chemistry with Stephen Rea. They share space in that humid, cramped glass box, creating a bond that becomes the engine for everything that follows. When the story violently pivots to the neon noir of London, the danger changes shape. The guns fade out. Identity takes over. The film stops being about politics and becomes about who people think they are, and what happens when that certainty collapses. It won the Oscar for Best Screenplay and secured a stack of nominations, yet it feels strangely overlooked and forgotten today. For me, that contrast is part of the power. It does not live on trophies or twists. It lives on the uneasy feeling it leaves behind long after it is over. None of these films ask for permission. They just exist, rough edges and all. If that's the kind of cinema you want more of, subscribe to VintageVerse. Catch you in the next one.